So welcome to tonight's meeting of the Eastleigh Local Area Committee, which is being broadcast and recorded via Teams Live. My name is Councillor Tina Campbell. I am chair of this committee and will be conducting the meeting tonight. During the meeting, you will hear from members of the committee who are on your screen now. Also present are the officers from Eastleigh Borough Council, who are now shown on the screen. They will present their reports that have been written and provide support for the committee tonight. If we experience a connection problem, this event will be paused. If a councillor loses connection or joins later, I will ask them to introduce or reintroduce themselves for the benefit of the viewers. In the unlikely event of myself losing connection, the Vice Chair, Councillor Alex Bourne, will take over. Please bear with us this evening as we are experiencing some technical difficulties. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. Public participation during this virtual meeting will be undertaken in a slightly different way. The members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited into the live event at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. A verbal 30-second advance warning will be provided by the local area manager. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. But once the debate has started, it is not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruption, we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people from the meeting or continue in private. Neither of which we take lightly or wish to do, and I'm sure won't be required this evening. So, first item is apologies. Laura, do we have any apologies, please?
No formal apologies, Chair, but just that Councillor Clark may join us later.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have declarations of interest they wish to make? Can they indicate now, please, if they do?
Yes, Chair, I do.
Okay, would you like to state the nature and reason for your interest, please?
Yes, Chair. This is in relation to item number 7, I believe, for the plan application for the old post office. It's just to make the committee and member of the public aware that I do live in a property adjacent to the planning application. However, this is a rented property, and I will not have any disclosable pecuniary interest that would prevent me from participating and voting in it. And also because I'll be moving out next month, so I've come here with an open mind to make sure that I've hear all the evidence and listen to all the arguments. So therefore I'll be able to take part in the process.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you for making us aware that you live close to the property that's subject to the planning application later. Okay. Does anyone else have an interest that they wish to declare at this stage? No, I can't see anybody. You can, of course, declare any interest as they occur to you later in the meeting. So moving on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 17th of November 2020. I would like to sign these minutes off as a true record. Do I have a proposer for that, please?
Yes, Chair, I propose them.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. And do I have a seconder?
I'll second them.
Okay, I heard Councillor Tyson Payne there. Thank you for that. Can I ask everyone to unmute and signal their agreement they are a true record?
Yeah. Agreed.
Agreed.
And just to check, does anybody disagree? Okay, there's silence, so let's move on to item 4. This is when we would normally have public participation. However, I believe there is no public participation, Laura, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. So that takes me on to item number 5, which is the Chair's report. So I'm just going to pop my glasses on so I can see this. Okay, so firstly, can I start by taking this opportunity of wishing everybody a very happy new year. I sincerely hope that it is a much happier and healthier one for us all. So following on from my update at the last ELAC meeting, I am pleased to confirm that the Pirelli Park play area is now open and is being well used by local families. Further landscaping and planting will follow in the spring. However, I would ask that local dog walkers use this area responsibly and not allow their pets to urinate against the play equipment, and that they bag and bin their dog waste. We need to work together to keep our play areas safe for our children. You may remember that at our November meeting, I did refer to a special planning meeting, which was due to take place on the 17th of December to hear the airport runway extension application. This meeting was rescheduled following a request from the airport, who wanted more time to respond to the latest public consultation. We are expecting this meeting to now take place in March, subject to further information being submitted by the airport this week and a further public consultation. Following the extensive vandalism of the free space skate park at the end of last year, this committee has taken the decision to bring forward the major improvement project that was planned for this site. The project will take in the region of 12 months to complete, but it will ensure that the young people of Eastleigh are not penalised because of the destructive actions of a few individuals, whilst making best use of the limited funding available. You will note from the agenda the proposal to support local charities and groups with community grant funding of £9,613. I'm extremely proud that at a time when many councils are struggling to deliver services and are having to make extensive cuts, that this council is still able to invest in the local community. I would like to draw your attention to the community pantry, which is now open at the Cable Works in Tinning Way. The pantry is open on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday from 9:30 to 12 and on a Wednesday from 4 to 6. It provides heavily discounted fresh, frozen and general foods to local families struggling to manage in these very challenging times. As you are no doubt aware, the council is currently surveying local citizens on proposals to create a parish council in the unparished part of Eastleigh. This would give residents greater ownership and control over the day-to-day activities and services delivered on their behalf, such as the maintenance of open spaces and play areas, the management of community buildings, cemeteries and local car parks. The survey closes on the 25th of January and a report will come to an extra meeting of this committee on the 10th of February. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to another item on tonight's agenda. Following citizen feedback at our last committee meeting, we are proposing to increase the leaf collection service in the autumn so that our commitment to tree planting does not create problems for local residents. Thank you. So I'm now going to move on to item 6, which is the presentation of planning guidelines. And I'm pleased to say that I have seen that Councillor Clark has joined us, so that's fantastic. So David, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen if you'll bear with me one moment. Can everybody see that? Or could someone let me know if they can?
Yeah, it's up.
Yeah.
It's live.
No, thank you. Okay, so this is a brief presentation on how planning applications are considered and determined. Proposals must be considered on planning grounds. The committee must determine proposals in line with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan for the borough is formed of the saved policies of the adopted Eastleigh Local Plan Review 2001 to 2011 and the Hampshire and Minerals and Waste Plan. The examination hearings for the replacement Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 2036 concluded in January 2020, and the inspector's post-hearing advice and action points have subsequently been received. The council decided to proceed on this basis, and weight can therefore be given to the policies in this plan accordingly. There's a range of other relevant considerations that can be taken into account when deciding a planning application. These include adopted supplementary planning documents, which relate to a range of matters, including quality places, residential parking standards, and planning obligations. There's also relevant government policy, including the National Planning Policy Framework and its presumption in favour of sustainable development. The National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF, is a material consideration of significant weight that takes precedence over development plan policies which do not accord with the framework. The latest iteration of the NPPF was published in February 2019. It sets out a number of key planning requirements, which you can see on the screen there. These include delivering sustainable development without delay, meeting housing needs and boosting the delivery of housing, promoting growth of the economy, requiring high standards of design, and that development prevents or mitigates its impacts. The framework includes a presumption in favour of sustainable development unless adverse impacts outweigh benefits, and sets out 3 threads of sustainability, these being economic, social and environmental. These are interdependent and need to be pursued in mutually supportive ways in order to secure sustainable development. Again, a range of other material considerations that can be taken into account. These include planning history for an application site or adjacent sites, previous applications or decisions, appeal decisions, site-specific policies and matters, consultee and third-party comments, as well as precedent and current case law. There's also a range of issues that can't be taken into account and aren't material to the determination of the application. Again, there's a list, a non-exhaustive list on the screen there. So moral, racial, religious views, devaluation of property, loss of private views, matters covered by the legislation, and civil matters, including boundary disputes. There's 2 main different types of planning application route which an applicant can go down. Firstly, there's a full application where all detailed matters are considered as part of the one submission, and that's relevant to the application that we've got before members this evening. Alternatively, a 2-step process can be taken. So that's an outline application first of all, which establishes the principle of development. That's then followed by a reserved matters application, which covers any details that weren't approved at outline stage. In both cases, generally, applications will be followed by discharge of conditions applications, which will allow for the submission of further details that are controlled by condition. The council is required to consider whether otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the use of conditions, which are then discharged and complied with, as I said. Conditions need to meet 6 tests, which set out in planning legislation. They're stated there on the screen. Conditions have to be necessary, relevant to planning and to development to be permitted, enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other respects. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, David. So just before we go to the planning application itself, I would just like to remind councillors that they must be present for the duration of this entire item in order to be able to cast their vote at the end. So if you do drop out at any stage, we obviously need to make sure that we get you back in as quickly as possible and that you haven't missed any information in the meantime. So David, can I ask you please to present your report?
You can indeed. I'll just share my screen again. Has that appeared?
That's live now, David.
Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item 7, which is our planning item for this evening, is a full planning application for the former Eastleigh Post Office site at 14 High Street in Eastleigh Town Centre. This seeks approval for the comprehensive redevelopment of the site, including the demolition of the existing post office and sorting office buildings and the construction of 2 separate blocks of 4 and 6 stories in height respectively. Both of these will have flexible commercial floor space at ground floor level and residential apartments above, totaling 28 units, which will be a mixture of 1 and 2 bedrooms, and 35% of which would be affordable housing. Proposals also include the provision of an area of public realm space in between the buildings. So this is the application site, which is outlined in red. It's one of the larger sites within Eastleigh Town Centre and lies to the eastern side of the High Street, which you can see just in here, and the western side of Wells Road, which is just in here. This is principally a service route for the adjoining uses along the High Street, Market Street to the east, and Lee Road to the north. Much of the application site is covered by buildings, as you can see, these being in the form of the former post office to its western section, and the sorting office building to the east. The post office is presently vacant, whilst the sorting office building is in use as a creative hub, which provides art and design studios and flexible event space for its tenants. The site's got a small car parking area, which is just to the north, which is bound by a small cluster of trees to its western side. There's a private access route which runs parallel with the southern boundary of the site. This links Wells Road with the High Street, but is presently gated sort of partway along here and also at its eastern end. The immediate surroundings are largely commercial in nature, but there are residential uses to the immediate north and southern sides of the post office building, as well as within Grayton House, which lies to the southern side of the sorting office. This is just an aerial image to provide further context to the development site. You can see Wells Road, which sort of curves round in here, with the parking area to the north and the trees to its western side, as well as the existing buildings which span the full width of the site. The 2.5-storey post office building is just in here, with the lower profile sorting office building just along there, and some sort of 2-storey flat roof additions which link the site and have been added on as the years have gone by. These are some images of the application site. The post office frontage can be seen in the image in the top left-hand corner of the screen, with a view of the route along the site's southern boundary in the top right-hand corner. At the bottom of the screen are the pitch roof buildings forming the sorting office. As you can see, parts of the existing structures do have a degree of architectural merit, but they aren't subject to any statutory listing or identified as buildings of local importance within the council's adopted local plan. Some further photos for context, with a view along the High Street in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So this is looking southwards with the post office building just around about the centre of the street there. The other images show different aspects of Wells Road, with those on the right-hand side of the screen looking north from the site. So this is the back of the sorting office building, which you can see just sort of peeking out in there. And you can see the image in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen is looking northwards from the site towards the back of the properties within Lee Road. And you can see one of the more recent, taller sort of mixed-use buildings which have been constructed just in there. So turning now to the development proposals, the application site lies within the Eastleigh Town Centre Special Policy Area within the Council's adopted local plan, where planning policies seek to promote high-quality urban design, maximise development density by providing the maximum number of stories that are appropriate, show all stories are designed for active use, and have ground floor uses which attract customers. To this end, the application proposes a comprehensive redevelopment scheme which seeks to make a more efficient use of the land through the demolition of existing buildings and the construction of 2 taller mixed-use buildings, each of which has flexible commercial space at ground floor level and then residential units above. The building to the High Street frontage, which you can see on the left, would be 4 stories in height, and the building to the rear, which is on the right-hand side, would be 6 stories. You can see the commercial space at ground floor level, which is highlighted in pink on the screen, along with integral bike and bin storage, which would serve the buildings. The upper floors would then be residential, as I said, with the front block being wholly affordable housing and providing for 10 units. This represents an over provision of 2 units when taking account of the vacant building credit that would apply in this case. There would be a modest overall reduction in the level of commercial or employment floor space, which is a material consideration to the scheme. However, this must be balanced against the development's wider and other benefits, and the applicant has also agreed to the principle of a contribution towards town centre employment projects as part of the offsetting of this reduction. As I mentioned earlier, the sorting office building is currently in use as a creative hub, and this matter has been raised in a number of the representations received. Whilst the loss in employment floor space is a material consideration, as I mentioned, The displacement of the existing tenants isn't a planning matter which can be taken into account in decision making. Notwithstanding this, it is understood that the council in its role as landowner have been in dialogue with the tenants with a view to assisting in the relocation of this facility to alternative premises owned by the council and which have been identified elsewhere in the centre of Eastleigh. This is, however, not a matter for the council in its role as local planning authority. In terms of other matters, the existing trees, which are to the north of the site and which we saw in the aerial image earlier on, are to be removed, with this area providing for further bin and bike storage and servicing for the new uses. Replacement planting will, however, be provided within the central public space, as is indicated on the drawing. Pedestrian through route is also proposed along the southern boundary of the site, which would link Wells Road with the High Street and thereby allow access to both blocks from these roads. Finally, the development will be car-free, which is considered acceptable in this case, given the town centre location of the site and the range of sustainable transport options and facilities that are available in Eastleigh, and no objections have been raised in this respect by the Highway Authority. Turning to the residential levels of the buildings, so this is an example of the internal layout, with this being the first floor level of the blocks. The apartments include a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units in each block, with these being designed to meet the government's national space standards in terms of their size. The layouts also generally afford good levels of light and outlook to habitable spaces, and whilst a few of the bedroom windows at first and second floor level to the north of the building at the front of the site, so just in here, are perhaps more compromised given their proximity to the buildings to the north, on balance this is considered to be acceptable. In terms of the matter of privacy, the council's Quality Places SPD requires a distance of 20 metres between flats which are new builds and 22 metres between new to existing. The new blocks would fall below this standard with 16.2 metres between them. However, within a town centre setting where there's perhaps a reasonable expectation that buildings may be sited slightly closer together, again on balance this is considered to be acceptable in this instance and would not unduly compromise the privacy of the residents. In terms of the rear block and the distance to the facing windows of the existing properties to the west, which is just in here, this would be modestly below standard at approximately 20 metres, but again on balance the 2 metre difference would not be such as to result in undue material harm in this case. There is a sort of an amenity issue which is referenced in the report, and this relates to the conflict between the windows on the first and second floor level on the northern side of the front building, and those which are present within the adjacent flat 12A High Street. A solution has been proposed to address this and prevent a loss of privacy, and I'll cover this later on within the update section of the presentation. So these are some of the elevations of the front block, with the High Street frontage on the left and the southern elevation onto the pedestrian link on the right hand side of the screen. The design has an architectural sort of formality to it, and as you can see, it seeks to maximise shop frontage at ground floor level and appropriately address the High Street. Whilst it would be larger than the building which would replace, the outline of which you can see sort of dashed with a dashed line on the screen. It's been designed so the third floor is recessed from the building's main elevations to visually reduce its perceived height and massing, and thereby respect the predominantly 2 and 3 storey scale of this part of the street. You can see this on the street scene view of the High Street, which is shown on the screen, with the existing view at the top and the proposed view at the bottom. As you can see, the ridge height, the more advanced 3rd storey, respects that of the properties adjacent to it, and the general design approach is also similar to that which has been approved slightly further to the north of the site at number 4 to 6 High Street. This is yet to be built, but you can just about see the outline of what's been approved indicated in red on the left hand side of the screen. These are some 3D visuals of the front block for further context, with these looking both ways along the High Street. Red brick is proposed for the building's elevations in keeping with the adjacent properties, and a sort of bronze coloured metal cladding is proposed for the subservient top floor. Design features including the use of perforated elevational panels, which will be to the sort of side of the windows, incorporate a franking pattern, and these have been included to provide a subtle nod to the former use of the site as a post office, and overall the simple and robust materials that are proposed give a high quality appearance to the development, whilst also providing visual interest to the High Street. Turning to the rear block, which is the larger of the 2 buildings at 6 storeys in height. This building has less formal elevational symmetry to it, but the overall design remains sort of well ordered and structured to provide continuity with the front block. The image on the right hand side of the screen is there to highlight the approach that's been taken to the glazing, to the residential units on the upper floor of the building. So these have been sort of paired to give the main 5 stories of the block essentially the appearance of 3, with the 6th story then being set notably recessed. And both of these elements assist in visually reducing the perceived height and massing of the building. Again, a simple palette of materials we used, but this time with buff coloured bricks to reflect the more varied materials on Wells Road where the development will sit. This is a 3D view of the overall scheme, which shows the buildings in context. It also shows how they relate to each other and the spaces and the existing development around them. Whilst the building to the rear, as I mentioned, would be taller than that at the front, and also the existing surrounding neighbouring buildings. In this particular case, it's considered the site's got the capacity to accommodate the scale of development given its size and also the spacing that exists around it, as you can see in the image. Whilst acknowledging therefore the building of this scale and this location will begin to alter the character of this part of the centre of Eastleigh to a degree, it's not considered that it will detract from it, but rather act as a positive driver to encourage further redevelopment and regeneration of this part of the town. And the approach to design to the development in this respect has been supported by the Council's urban designer, as well as the independent Eastleigh and Winchester Design Review panel. Some more 3D visuals of the developments, which show different views from street level at this time. So to the top left is the view down the pedestrian route along the southern boundary of the site, which connects onto Wells Road and also links into the new public realm space, which is just in here. The public realm can be seen on the images on the right hand side of the screen. So as you can see, the space will be well landscaped with varied hard surfacing and soft planting. It also provides for potential for outdoor seating for the new commercial uses. As shown in the images, it's well overlooked by the new buildings, which is positive from a community safety perspective, and outdoor lighting will also be provided, which will further assist with this. The image to the bottom left shows the views towards the site looking southwards, and this, as well as the image in the top right hand corner of the screen, I think really helps to demonstrate the effectiveness of the pairing of the windows vertically that I mentioned in the previous slides, in seeking to split the building into 3 and thereby reduce its perceived massing and scale. They also show the more limited views that would be afforded to the very upper story of the rear block from street level, as you can see in here, with its recessed nature notably assisting in this respect. So some updates to the reports as set out in the agenda. So some further consultation responses have been received. Southampton Airport have confirmed they've got no objection. They've recommended informative in relation to the use of cranes. Environmental Health have also raised no objection subject to a range of conditions. These cover contaminated land, hours of deliveries, hours of operation, commercial uses, noise control measures covering building insulation and music levels within the commercial units, all this being in the interest of amenity. And members have been sent around today an updated list of these conditions in these respects. Responses also been received from Economic Development, who have advised that they're supportive of the principle of redevelopment that contributes to the regeneration of Eastleigh Town Centre. It improves public links between High Street and Market Street and the surrounding public realm. The matters of the reduction in employment floor space that I mentioned earlier was raised, and a developer contribution has been requested to mitigate for this. And as I said earlier on, the applicant has agreed to this. Other matters concern landscaping provision and the need to ensure that new commercial uses can be retained moving forward were also raised, and these are already covered by conditions that are set out within the agenda. Further updates, so amended plans have been received. I mentioned in the earlier slides that there was a bit of an issue in terms of the relationship with the windows on the northern side of the building and number 12A High Street, which lies to the north. To address this, the applicant has reduced the number of windows to this side, so they're now sort of brick panels included in there, and they're also proposing the use of externally fitted louvres to those that remain and that are immediately alongside the neighbouring property. You can see these sort of denoted by the horizontal lines just in here. And on the right hand side of the screen there's sort of a section drawing which will show how they'll work. So they're fitted at an angle to the exterior of the windows, and they prevent views sort of down and into the neighbouring windows and the roof lights, which you can see denoted in here. Just for clarity, the lower section of these windows will be obscured to prevent views out of it, and conditions are recommended in these respects. So in summary and conclusion, the development accords with local and national planning policies in terms of making efficient use of a sustainably located and partly vacant brownfield site and achieving appropriate densities, whilst at the same time respecting the character of the area, promoting regeneration and change within Eastleigh Town Centre and contributing to its vitality and viability, as well as securing well-designed and attractive places. It will also include an over-provision of on-site affordable housing and mitigate its impacts upon and contribute to improvements to local infrastructure through developer contributions, which are both social and economic benefits of the scheme. It's also acceptable in terms of other material impacts, including highways and residential amenity, with no objections having been raised by consultees, subject to conditions and/or planning obligations. And the updated recommendation is therefore subject to the completion of outstanding consultations, of which there are a few remaining. So those relate to principally to drainage matters, and also whether or not any contributions will be required to education and health, and then the addition of any necessary amendments or conditions. The applicant enters into a legal agreement to secure the required affordable housing and planning obligations, and the completion of a habitats regulations assessment of the development by the local planning authority, and the undertaking of subsequent consultation with Natural England where required, to delegate back to the Head of Housing and Development in conjunction with the Chair and Vice Chair of Eastleigh Local Area Committee to permit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. So we're now going to go to members of the public who have registered that they want to express an opinion on this item. I believe we have 2 written statements from members of the public who wish to register their objection. So can I ask Guy Riddock, please, to read the statement from Mr. Rod Murchie, please?
Thank you, Chair. Right. I write to reiterate my objection to this proposed development. I've walked down the High Street and noted that all the buildings are 2-storey, some like the old post office with attic rooms in the roof. This development is therefore out of scale with the rest of the street and out of proportion with the old town centre. I should add that the High Street is looking particularly shabby, with many poorly maintained buildings, some of which are past end of life. I do not have any objection to the principle of redevelopment, and in fact I would not object to the redevelopment of all of High Street and Market Street if it were designed for people and in keeping with the rest of the low-rise town. That's from Rod Murchie of 33 Sovereign Way.
Okay, thank you. And then I believe we have a statement from Miss Wood. And I believe Miss Wood lives at 12A High Street, so the property that David was referring to.
Yes, that's correct. I'll read that statement out now. As the immediate next door neighbour to the old post office building, I have already submitted an objection to this proposed development. The most significant to me are these 2, which I hope the council will consider during this meeting. Firstly, this proposal in its current form would lead to a considerable invasion of privacy for both the current and future residents of 12A High Street and the residents of the new flats at number 14 High Street, because of the proposed location of all the north-facing windows and balconies, and the proposed very close distance, approximately 2 metres, between our walls. Furthermore, the sheer number of stories and closeness of the proposed building would eclipse most natural light for this residence also. Secondly, as someone with asthma and perfect hearing, I cannot see how I could possibly continue to use my residence safely and peacefully once demolition, foundation digging and rebuilding has started. Moving out is the only way to avoid this continuous dust, noise, vibration and reduced privacy. This would be an unexpected, unwanted and frankly unaffordable expense, and more than inconvenient at this time for me and my landlord.
Okay, thank you for that, Guy. And then I believe we have James Futrell, the architect, who wishes to speak live in support of the application. Do we have James with us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Lovely. So whenever you're ready, James, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. The submitted scheme represents a collaborative response to the site and wider town, informed by research and input from a full design consultant team, the client and local planning policy. Formal pre-application planning advice was sought and responded to in the submitted application, resulting in a scheme that is compliant with town centre planning policy. The proposed development seeks to positively contribute to the regeneration of the High Street and wider town centre. In addition, enhanced public links are formed between the High Street and Market Street, together with a new public realm space. The design incorporates aspects that reflect Eastleigh's industrial and railway heritage, as well as the previous use of the buildings. As the planning officer has already mentioned this evening, the site is somewhat unusual when compared to near neighbouring sites due to the large available area on the site. The existing buildings on the site can be viewed as two halves, whereby the front half, fronting onto the high street, was the former post office. This part of the building is actually in quite a poor state of repair and has remained unused since the post office vacated the facility. The internal circulation and layout of this section of the building is highly convoluted, and as a result, a meaningful conversion of the property is not easily found. The rear half of the building is a single-storey structure which formed the sorting office associated with the post office historically. In more recent times, this section of the building has been operating as a set of art and design studios branded as the sorting office. This building is particularly space hungry due to its single-storey nature, leading to a much lower density of development on the site when compared to surrounding properties. As part of the proposed development, the applicant is liaising with the occupants of the sorting office to relocate their operations within Eastleigh town centre. The design proposes to remove the existing buildings on the site in favour of two new buildings, sited at the east and western extents of the site. Between the two new buildings, a new area of public realm will be created. The ground floors of the two new buildings are proposed for flexible commercial use, able to accommodate a large range of potential users or tenants. These ground floor spaces also complement the new external spaces, adding further life and vigour to the public realm. The upper floors are proposed for residential use, with 10 affordable rent units in the front block and 18 residential units for market rent in the rear block. This provides much needed new residential accommodation through the regeneration of the site. The new residential accommodation is proposed to meet nationally described space standards and will be constructed to lifetime home standards in the affordable units. As the planning officer's report is already listed this evening, we have been reviewing an option on the northern side which puts forward a solution to address the overlooking, incorporating an external louvered fin to permanently eliminate any possible overlooking to the north. The new proposed buildings are of higher density than the existing building and have been carefully reviewed against existing streetscapes, surrounding property massing and in the wider public realm. They provide a considered response, notably creating high quality buildings and urban design, maximising the appropriate development density in line with saved local policy. The proposed buildings and new public realm are designed to be constructed from high quality materials and to be reflective and complementary of surrounding buildings and the wider heritage of the town, including links to the railway and the historic site use as a post office. A key design component of the proposed buildings is the arch motif, which is introduced to the ground floor of the commercial space elevations. This motif reflects the industrial and railway buildings of the town, having been identified as an original and local building typological feature in research into the scheme. Another key design component proposed across the new buildings is the perforated panel that will sit adjacent to windows, incorporating the pattern of the franking stamp, which reflects the site's former use as a post office. The new building facing the high street is proposed to be primarily constructed from red brick to sit comfortably against other red brick buildings along the high street. And the proposed building at the rear of the site is proposed to be a buff brown brick, reflecting the more diverse material palette evident along Wells Road. Overall, therefore, the proposed scheme offers the opportunity to create a high quality, efficient, mixed-use development in the town centre on an existing site. Furthermore, the proposal provides the opportunity to create new public links and public realm for wider community use. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, James. And I should just clarify for anybody watching and thinking that may have been longer than 3 minutes. James actually was entitled to 6 minutes. It was 3 minutes per speaker, so 2 against and 6 minutes therefore for James. So thank you very much.
Chair, apologies for interrupting. Just before we go any further, it's probably worth us just reiterating Councillor Doogie's declaration of interest, just in case anybody has tuned in following him making that interest. We usually repeat them, any relevant ones, especially for planning items.
OK, so would you like Councillor Doogie to confirm his interest again?
Yes, please.
OK, over to you, Councillor Doogie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just as I said before, I do live in the flat adjacent to the plan application. but as I said previously, it is a rented property, and I do not have any discovery of pecuniary interest that would prevent me from participating or taking a vote on this plan application. So I mentioned, well, I came prepared to this meeting with an open mind to listen to all the arguments, and also the evidence. So therefore, I'm able to take part in the vote.
Lovely. Thank you very much for clarifying the situation again. I'm now going to open it up to members to ask any questions. So questions only at this stage about the planning application. And if you could use the chat, please, to indicate that you'd like to ask one. OK, so we have Councillor Tyson Payne. If you could pop your camera on, please.
Hello, thank you. I was waiting for the red block. Hello, thank you. I just want to clarify a couple of things. The pedestrian walkthrough, from the pictures you showed, it looks like the width of both of those walkthroughs has been reduced. Is that correct? Could you also confirm for me the number of, I missed writing down exactly how many apartments, flats are being created in each block, and whether they're for sale or for rent. And also, so your objector said the distance from number 14 to 12A was about 2 metres. I think it's less than that, but I would like to have that confirmed. I hope that all makes sense. Thank you very much.
OK, thank you, Councillor Tyson Payne. David, would you like to answer each councillor's questions in turn?
I can do, if that's easier, Chair.
OK.
I'm live. In terms of the number of flats in each block, so there's 10 flats within the front block, so they would all be affordable units, and our housing officer advised they would be affordable rent is the preference within there. There would then be 18 units in the rear block, which I understand would be offered for private rent, is my understanding. And in both cases, in both blocks, there are a mixture of one and two bedroom units. In terms of the proximity to 12A, I think it is slightly closer than the 2 metres in terms of the proximity that's there, and also to pick up on one of the points that the resident had sort of raised within there. So obviously the overlooking issue was recognised within the report, and amendments have been put forward to address that. In terms of the sort of proximity to those windows, there are some roof lights on that side of the neighbouring property, 2 of which I understand serve a bedroom and 1 serves a bathroom space. So they're not primary habitable spaces. The bedroom's also covered, also has another window on its eastern side, and the living room space, which I understand is at the front, has got a window to the frontage. So whilst the new building will impact to a degree on the light received to those roof lights, the rooms themselves would still sort of receive adequate light in planning terms from either side, and alternative windows. So except there will be some impact, but not to a degree that would be acceptable in terms of the application. The walkthrough, I haven't got the exact measurement in terms of it being reduced, but I don't believe it's been notably reduced relative to what it is at the moment. There was obviously a desire to make sure it doesn't become a sort of narrowed alleyway. You want it to be a desire line and it to be open and inviting for people to use. So it's a reasonable width for that purpose, and to allow, as I say, to sort of invite people down to use it and to make use of the public realm space and use it as a through link.
OK, thank you for that. So we're now going to go to Councillor Doogie. If you'd like to ask any questions you have, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on live. Yeah, I am now. So 2 questions. One, the first one is in relation to the mitigation for the tree being cut down. Can you clarify whether that new area where that mitigation will take place will incorporate new trees being planted, or is it a case it's going to be substituted with sort of astroturf or anything along those lines? And my second question is regarding cladding. That wasn't mentioned. Is the building going to be fitted with cladding And so can you give more details about what sort of cladding that's been used and how effective it's going to be if I was to happen or to take place? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Doogie. Would you like to answer those questions, please, David?
Right, certainly.
Apologies, we are just experiencing sort of technical delay. So David, if you just want to start speaking, it will eventually catch up to you.
Okay, no problem. So as I mentioned, there are some existing trees which Councillor Doogie referenced, which are sort of in the northern part of the site along the western boundary of that section. The trees there, they do provide a sort of a rare bit of greenery in an otherwise quite sort of urban sort of area just up there, but they are kind of growing through the fence there. They're self-seeded trees, so they're not in the sort of best condition in terms of their longevity. So our tree officer accepted they could be removed and would be better to have replanting to mitigate for them, and trees that have a longer growth potential. The sort of public realm area in the centre does indicatively show tree planting within there, and the final sort of details of the landscaping are supposed to be covered by conditions, so we can ensure that any planting that does go in there is as an appropriate sort of species for its setting and for and to provide enhancements to the public realm. The other question in terms of the cladding that are proposed, so there's sort of predominantly brick on the buildings, but there are sections of cladding that would be used. In terms of their sort of properties, they will obviously need to meet building regulations, and there's obviously a sort of stringency associated with cladding with what's happened sort of elsewhere that I'm sure everybody is fully familiar with. So that would be covered. I mean, it's not a planning matter for us to ensure it meets sort of fire regulations, but it would be covered by building regulations separately outside of this process.
Okay, thank you for that, David. So we're now going to move to Councillor Irish. Would you like to ask any questions you have, please?
Thank you, Chair. Am I there? Good. Yeah. My question relates to the colonnades. Are we going to keep the colonnades? I certainly hope we are going to keep them. But if we are, it looked to me from the drawing that the colonnade was right across the windows of one of the flats. Is that right? Did I see that correctly? So, firstly, can you tell me if we're going to keep the colonnades? And secondly, are they not going to be obstructing the vision from the windows? Thank you, Chair.
David, over to you, please.
So yes, I mean the colonnades are shown to be retained. I think there's a sort of a plan policy which seeks to extend the sort of colonnade scheme and retain them as part of the sort of town centre setting. There's a possibility during the construction that section may need to be removed to facilitate the building works potentially. It has been looked at in terms of the relationship with the windows. So from memory, that the sort of colonnades, you've got a heightened section where the walkway is, so to sort of highlight that as a walkway alongside the building. So they could be raised slightly. If they were raised up to be the same level of that, they would sit right at the top of the windows and therefore sort of obscure all of the view to the entirety of the windows. If you lowered them down too much, they potentially could be too low, and therefore they do sort of sit partway up the windows. They will have a bit of an impact. There will still be a bit of a view, sort of a view outside the sort of upper section of the window. So it's trying to find the balance between having a decent sort of outlook from those windows, keeping the colonnades, which are an important part of the town centre, and yeah, as I say, just trying to find that balance between the two.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Bicknell, you have a question, please, or questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I noticed that within the environmental comments on this scheme that we're putting in bat boxes for potentially foraging bats. So I have a request if we can actually, because we've got a 6-storey building at the back, if we can actually consider putting in swift boxes, because yeah, I mean swifts are diminishing due to the fact that a lot of people are having their soffits and gutterings done, so they can't get up under the eaves anymore. So if we can put in swift boxes, I think we requested and had them put in at the Village Hotel in Bournemouth Road, and that. So yeah, so a question stroke request: can we put some swift boxes in, please? Thank you.
David, comments, please.
Yes, so I believe bat and bird boxes are proposed as part of the scheme, as part of the ecological enhancements. There is within condition 7, as set out within the agenda as published, within the details that we're requesting to be submitted, the sort of final details. Within there's the final details of ecological enhancement, compensation and mitigation measures. So we can pick that up as part of the details that are provided with that condition, and make sure that an appropriate number are provided, and they're also provided an appropriate location on the right sides of the building, because that obviously has an effect as to how well they're used. So we can pick that up through the details for the condition.
Lovely, thank you for that. Councillor Bourne, you have a question or some questions before we'll go back to Councillor. Oh no, just to you, Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. So, you know, being a town centre development, this is a unique one in ELAC, where we're saying that there's no parking spaces, you know, which is brilliant because it's right in the middle of the public transport hub. With regards to the social affordable housing, etc., will we be making sure that that is pointed out clearly to any tenants? And you know, it would seem unfair to then market these to people with cars when there is nowhere for them to park their cars. And so if people had to bid on these properties, you know, is this could we set this as a condition for whoever's going to be in charge of the social housing, because otherwise we could create ourselves some problems. Thank you, Chair.
David, do you want to comment on that aspect?
Just sort of briefly. I mean, there's an informative which is on the decision notice, which just sort of highlights that this is a sort of residence parking scheme, and we don't provide sort of permits to new uses. And it's obviously obvious from the layout there isn't any immediate parking on site. In terms of, I do appreciate that the decision notices and planning permissions aren't always picked up by people that move into properties or aren't always seen. In terms of, so we couldn't really set it as a condition that they're informed or future tenants are informed, but it's certainly something I can pick up with the project manager from the council sort of role as landowner and applicant for the development, and check what measures can be included to make sure that any future residents are fully aware before they move in that there isn't any car parking provided as part of the development. Okay,
thank you for that. I've had the opportunity previously to ask a few questions that I had, but there's just a couple of questions that I'm going to ask. So whilst I'm asking these, if any other councillors have any questions, if you can please indicate in the chat, otherwise we will move on shortly to the debate. David, I was just slightly concerned about the pipe that goes under the building. Because obviously, you know, if there becomes a problem with that pipe, how do you access it if you have a building over the top of it? So perhaps if you could just comment or give some reassurance on that one. And also, I think it's paragraph 21 refers to the potential for a sort of rain garden to deal with sort of surface water, or that can be quite an effective way of dealing with surface water. And I certainly liked that idea. So I just wondered, do we have any idea of whether that's being actively considered by the applicant? And I know in previous iterations I've seen of the design drawings and things, the wall sort of along, if you were accessing from High Street and walking towards Wells Place, the wall on the right hand side was sort of planted all the way along. Can you just confirm that that still is although we may not know exactly what the planting is, that it still is the intention that that would be a green wall going all down the right hand side, please?
I'm live. In terms of the pipe underneath the building, it may be easier if it's okay, Chair, if I just share my screen briefly again, just to show some sort of context to this. Go back to my presentation. can you see that on the screen? So this is the sort of site layout plan and shows the commercial space. So the pipe that at the moment, in terms of the drainage strategy, that's sort of indicated to run underneath the building, it's the rear building. It's a surface water sort of drainage pipe that would run roughly sort of east to west through this section of the building. So it would kind of be partly beneath the commercial space and partly beneath sort of some of the ancillary kind of bike store kind of areas. Potentially, pipes underneath buildings can have sort of impacts. If there's a problem with the pipe, you may have to sort of potentially dig up the floor within the building. So they're not always the most ideal solution. From my understanding, there are sort of logistical kind of issues in terms of the site where it's situated, accessing other pipes, etc., for sort of outfalls. The drainage scheme as a whole, and this kind of covers the sort of rain garden question as well, are kind of at the moment subject to further discussions. There's some outstanding further comments awaited from the county drainage team, from Southern Water, and also to pick up on the comments of the ecologist. So that's kind of, there's still a question mark in terms of the finalising of the drainage scheme. So we need to find a balance between recognising the constraints of the site. So it's obviously an urban site within a town centre, so we're not going to get sort of swales and things like that you would get on a greenfield site, but trying to include measures where we can to make sure they're appropriate. So at the moment there's still some question marks surrounding that and some outstanding comments. That is one of the subject twos within the recommendation. In terms of the sort of greenery kind of space, if I go to let me see if I can find the visual. So in terms of the elevation that you were talking about, is it sort of this side of the building in here, or?
So the main pedestrian walkway that would take you from High Street down through past the development to Wells Place, that sort of, yeah, so that picture you're pointing at now, the right hand side of that, that's to be planted all the way down, is that correct?
I will double check. If you can leave that with me, I'll come back to you on that. I'll just double check within the documents and come back to you on it. Additionally, in addition to that, there is a green roof which is also proposed as part of the mitigation sort of measure, and additional sort of landscaping which will go on the sort of ancillary storage buildings. That's a bike storage and bin storage sort of building in the northern part of the site, which will go in there. So I'll just double check whether that's still proposed. It's indicated by the visual along there, but I'll just double check on that point and come back to you if I may.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any other questions from councillors? Last opportunity. I can't see that anybody's indicating that they have a burning question. So do I have a proposer, please?
I'll propose.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to propose.
Okay, I think Councillor Irish got in there marginally before you. So yeah, we'll go Councillor Irish proposing. So seconder, Councillor Moore.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so over to debate. Who would like to kick off the debate? Nobody wishes to say anything on this development?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Bourne.
Yeah, so I think this is a very important development for the town centre, where we're providing 1 and 2 bedroom accommodations in the town centre, not miles away. So actually people who don't have cars can live in and around the town centre, where the public transport links of the bus station, the train station, cycle links, etc. are brilliant. It's also going to breathe some life back into our town centre. There's lots of empty shops, and so, you know, the residents in these flats will, you know, be customers on the doorstep. Hopefully we can entice some excellent traders into the ground floor spaces as well. You know, yes, it's quite tall in comparison to the rest of the area, but that's where we get the volume of the flats in. You know, there's been a lot of talk in the community about not building on open green spaces and that we should use brownfield sites. So this is a perfect opportunity for the council to listen to those concerns and put in a lot of accommodation into brownfield site, and I think it's a very good use of the site. So this gets my full support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. So we're now going to go to Councillor Tyson Payne, and then we will go to Councillor Irish.
So much as I feel that we do need more accommodation in the town centre, I think this is too big. I think there are too many flats in too small a space. I don't like the size of the second block. I think it's too big. I appreciate that we need to get people into the town centre, but I think the last year has told us how much we need space in which to live. And I don't feel these flats give people the space that they wish to live in. I'm also very concerned about the walkway through. From looking at the pictures, it does seem to me that even only a few centimetres has been taken from each side. At the moment, I don't find them pleasant to walk down those alleyways, cut throughs, call them what you will. I think they feel claustrophobic at the moment. I suspect they will feel more claustrophobic after this development has been built. I think we could have had slightly smaller and still brought people into the town centre. I feel it sets a precedent for the size of buildings to be built in the future. If we start with our first major development in the town centre having a 4-storey and a 6-storey building, the next will be 6 and 8, and I have real concerns about it. I do think we need to bring people into the town centre. We need people to live in the town centre, but I don't think this is the right development for that. And also, I'll be, not that it's a planning consideration, I don't like the look of them either, but that isn't a planning consideration, but I do think that it's too dense, and I'm not comfortable supporting this. I thank you very much.
Okay, before we go to Councillor Irish, I just want to make any viewers aware that it has been confirmed that yes, there will be green planting along that walkway on the right hand side. So thank you very much to the planning team for confirming that. So we're now going to go to Councillor Irish, and after Councillor Irish we will then go to Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've thought long and hard about this. I mean, I've been pondering it in my mind for some time, how it's all going to look, but I think it's quite an exciting development, to be honest, and it's giving us everything we need, or lots of things that we need. I particularly like the open space part in the middle. If that's for the community to use, that's particularly good. So that's a bit more community use in the town. I think it's going to bring in more commercial things, hopefully, and I think it's going to be quite an exciting place for people to live. That, you know, that don't need a car, but don't need all these things. They can just live there in the town centre. It's a very, very sustainable site. But the only thing I'm worried about is, and this relates to my question, I'm really worried about these colonnades. If they do cut across somebody's window, I don't think that's a particularly nice outlook for anybody. So I hope we can solve that colonnade problem. But apart from that, Chair, I like it. It's very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Irish, and now over to Councillor Mann, please.
Thank you, Chair. Most of what I was going to say been covered by Councillor Bourne and Councillor Irish, but what I'd like to say is that to get more people into our town centre, we need to get these developments going, because of in the town centre last week, I just wanted, the only reason I went there was to have a look around. And when you look up, they don't look really all that great. I would have liked to have the whole area knocked down and rebuilt, and properly, regenerated rather than just having small blocks, which we could have been able to, rebuild the whole area rather than just small blocks. So I agree with the Councillor Irish and Councillor Bowen that we need to get more people living in the town centre to get some life into the town centre. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those comments, Councillor Mann. So we're now going to go to Councillor Clark and then we will go to Councillor Doogie.
Okay, thank you very much. So many of my views echo comments that have been made already. We know that all town centres and high streets are struggling, and I think this sort of development offers hope and offers a bit of a future to these sorts of town centres. I think that they do bring vibrancy. They will bring, probably younger people who will move in, who will help the hospitality and the hospitality sector, and perhaps help develop a nightlife in Eastleigh once we've got through this period of COVID restrictions. These sorts of developments do tend to create not just a bit of vibrancy, but general life. Things start to come into town centres to cater for people who are moving into these developments, which in turn attracts people to the town centre. People have new reasons to go into the town centre, so generally it just creates a future and I think some hope for people that want to trade in the town centre. I think that beyond that there are lots of other reasons to support it. As has been said many times, this is a brownfield development. I've lost count of the times during my period as a councillor that I've been told by people that we should be considering brownfield sites for housing. Well, here is a brownfield site and there is appropriate development being suggested for it, so I'm happy to support it. We do need housing. That's one thing I've always thought as a councillor. We need more housing, we need more affordable housing, and so again this ticks those boxes, providing, as Alex Bourne said, a good number of affordable housing for people who need homes, which is good. I think it's also sustainable in terms of transport. How many times do we hear people complain that developments we're supporting are dependent on the car? We want people to use the car less, and if we can encourage living where people don't need a car at all, then that's got to be good. And if you can't live without a car in Eastleigh town centre, you're going to struggle elsewhere, because we've got buses, we've got trains, got the best transport links really in the borough, relatively close to Parkway Station as well as Eastleigh Station, and we've got the Commonweal scheme, which I'd like to see improved, because a lot of younger people would rather not own their own car. They would like to join a sort of these sort of schemes that are opening up in the town centre that are clearly more sustainable and financially beneficial to the younger people that are taking part in them. So yeah, I'm happy for this. I think one other point I'd say is that many people want the experience of living in a town centre, and in order to get that experience they're quite happy to forego the space that you would have living outside of a town centre. So I'm quite happy to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Councillor Doogie, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not gonna say too much because I think very much everything's been said already. I think from my point of view, it's more the fact that this planning application will have a huge effect in terms of the outlook of the town centre. It's going to have a massive sort of shift towards the look of it. So I think from my point of view, I think it would have been better to see whether the council had the proper strategy in place to actually put forward the notion or put forward a view of how we want the future of the town to be like. So although I've got no objection to this planning specifically, but I think the comment I'm trying to make here is that these sort of applications need to be in partnership with a policy on how we can better shape the town centre, and not just do it as Councillor Mann said, bit by bit, because yes, as you step out there, it doesn't look great. But as noted by other councillors, this will bring people in, and that's what we need to do. But as I said, going forward, I think there needs to be more of a strategy so the resident can actually be confident in the fact that we're making this decision based on a plan rather than doing it as it comes. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much, Councillor Doogie. So I think if I've counted correctly, we just have Councillor Bicknell, who yes, I'm sure would want to speak, as he's also Cabinet lead. So Councillor Bicknell, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. And of course, there's you also that I'm sure will want to speak on the application.
Indeed, I will, but I'm saving the best till last, as they say.
Right. I should be brief because I mean there's an awful lot of things that people have said. I don't want to repeat, but I mean at the end of the day, this application does exactly, you know, I say exactly what it says on the tin. It's not a tin, but this is what regeneration is all about. At the end of the day, it is about revitalising what is, especially in the back area, a relatively rundown part of town with the rear access ways, and this will be a catalyst for further development. And bearing in mind that this committee has already granted an application of 4 stories fronting onto High Street down at number 4 High Street. So from a planning perspective, the actual committee does need to be consistent in how it determines applications. I've written them all down, but I'm not going to list them. It is almost totally policy compliant, this application. You're never going to get a perfect planning application, so you have to balance things. But with all the town centre safe policies from the Borough Council, it is compliant in pretty much all of them. At the end of the day, including height and including the use of land with high density brownfield land, and that features very heavily in the National Planning Policy Framework. Again, where this application is compliant, and bearing in mind that the overall thread or the underlying thread of the National Planning Policy Framework is a presumption in favour of development. So from a planning perspective and a National Planning Policy Framework perspective, there is nothing of any consequence for this application to be refused on. It's as close, pretty much as close to a perfect application as you're ever going to get at the end of the day. So at the actual application itself, as James said earlier, the design is to pick up the heritage of the town. Eastleigh is an industrial town. It's as plain and simple as that. That is fact. Eastleigh basically came into being through dirty great steam engines. At the end of the day, in the late Victorian industrial era. So it's a good application. It provides jobs in the fact that actually we've got a retail space that is empty at the moment. That by the time this is built will be 2 years further down the road. So we've got the flexible retail space in the ground floor that will provide jobs. It's providing affordable housing, and actually it's above our policy on affordable housing for sites such as this. EBC probably is almost certainly going to be the landlord here. So many of the things that people have asked with reference to the actual residents and what have you will easily be achievable, because it'll be us that, as I say, is more than likely going to be the landlord of the affordable units. It is keeping in the surrounding with other modern developments in Eastleigh Town. I draw your attention to the height and the scale of the Swan Centre, to Mitchell House, to Mitchell Road Car Park, to Eastleigh House. They're all over 4 stories and such like. So it's consistent with that as well. And it's regenerating a derelict site. And actually also as a positive, it's actually increasing and improving the biodiversity in the town centre in that part, because at the moment there's a few weeds growing between cracks in pavements, and some self-seeded trees. Well, with the open space in the centre, with the trees and the other biodiversity measures that be brought in, then there'll be a net gain for biodiversity and environment as well. So overall, I think it's an excellent application. It's got a very strong officer recommendation to permit, and obviously I will be fully supportive and of this application, and be voting accordingly. So thank you very much, Chair.
Lovely, thank you for that, Councillor Bicknell. So and just as the final person to speak, I think what I would just like to sort of focus on is just picking up on some of the language that other councillors have used to describe this application, or that, words that have come from the report. It's bold, it's exciting, it offers hope, it's about bringing vibrancy into the town, it's about creating that future. And I recognise that for some people, that whenever you create something new and you have that bold, exciting vision, it can be scary, and it can be a moving away from what's gone before, and some people find that difficult. And I think transitioning to a new, I suppose, version of what our town centre could look like can be quite challenging when you are in that transition period. So as Councillor Clark clearly sort of articulated, we want to move towards those car-free developments. We want people to be using their cars less, and schemes like this are one way of doing that. But in the meantime, when we go from how we live our lives now to how we're going to be living in the future, that can be sort of challenging. But this site is an ideal site for it, for all the reasons that my colleagues have outlined. And yes, there were a lot of objections to this site, but actually when you actually look at those objections, a lot of them were actually really more to do with support for the sorting office. And it's really important to me too that the sorting office is supported, but it's those businesses, the creativeness of the Eastleigh entrepreneurs that we're supporting, and the council's commitment to those entrepreneurs hasn't changed at all. It's just that it may not be taking place in that particular building anymore, but actually we're still firmly behind the creativity in the town. I like the fact that there is the nod to the past. This is a difficult building. Currently in its current format, to sort of make a great new space out of it. So yeah, it is going to be a radical new bold design, but there are those elements to it that sort of give that nod to the past, and I think that's really important, to give this building a sense of sort of place, because we need to be linking the sort of past, our present, and leading the way to the future. So I think it is a really great great application. I'm slightly nervous about the height of the building, because it is a big building, but it's bold and it's going to lead to regeneration, and that's really what we need to do. And exactly as other councillors have sort of said, we really need to get that strategy in place and to really be thinking about what we want our town centre to be all about. And I think this is a really good way to begin. So I'm very happy to support it. So I think that takes us very nicely into the vote. We would normally have an electronic voting process. But because we're having all sorts of technical difficulties and what have you, we're going to go to good old-fashioned recorded vote. So Laura, can I ask you to call each councillor by name, please, to cast their vote?
Of course, Chair. And as before, if you can just say your vote, I won't flick the camera to you. So Councillor Bourne.
4.
Councillor Campbell.
4.
Oh, apologies, I missed Councillor Bicknell.
Thank you, Laura. 4 in favour, yeah.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Doogie.
4.
Councillor Irish.
4.
Councillor Mann.
Or
Councillor Tyson Payne.
Against.
And that's everyone, Chair, and that's clearly carried.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Laura. So we'll now move on to the next item, which is item 8, the air quality annual update. Can I ask Neil Scott, please, to present his report?
Oh, is it working? Oh,
You need to share your desktop, Neil.
Pardon?
You need to share your screen.
Okay. Thought I had. Oh yeah, sorry, just 1 second.
There you go, it's live now, Neil.
Is it showing full screen now?
You just, there you go.
Hi, sorry about that. Yes. Oh, apologies, that's the first time I've done this, so I might be a little bit glitchy. My internet connection's not very good. Yeah, this is just a report that we do every 6 months, looking at the previous 6 months air quality monitoring data and the actions that we've done on the air quality action plan. As it's the start of the year, we are just going to discuss a little bit, or I'm going to discuss a little bit for the whole previous 12 months as well, which of course will be a little bit more interesting this year because of the lockdowns that we've had. Interesting being a bit of an understatement. So I've said I'm going to talk a little bit about the air quality, talk a little bit about the DEFRA grant projects which are included in the action plan, and then just some summary quickly about the other activities that we've done on the area action plan as well. Crikey, it seems to be jumping. Is that me jumping ahead?
Yeah, Neil, that'll be you. It might be that it's you're clicking your mouse or moving your mouse. There should be a couple of arrows at the bottom of your presenting screen that you can use to move the slides.
Yeah, I didn't actually touch anything, which is a little bit scary, but I'm keeping my hands under me out of the way at the minute. The table up at the minute shows just a summary of the monitoring data that we've collected over the previous 12 months. The nitrogen dioxide, Southampton Road, The Point and Steel Close. I'll come to Southampton Road last because there's something I need to say about that. The Point and Steel Close, you'll see that we've not had any exceedances this year, and the average has been low at 20 micrograms, so they've complied with that. Southampton Road, we've got data up to the end of August because there was a fault with the cabinet that led to the equipment getting wet, which happened in August. And what we've managed to do there is get the equipment removed, get the cabinet replaced, and I'm now at the point of reorganising, getting the equipment back in. So the value for the year is 25, but that's just for the first 7 months. So I appreciate that that's not a proper average, and I'll come on to that later, if I might. I've just had a message saying I got bad network quality. I don't know whether I should switch my camera off.
Yeah, switch your camera off, Neil, and it'll probably help.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a really bad connection at the minute. Oh, crikey. Come on, slide. Oh, wrong way. So what I've done as well on this next slide, sorry, is I've included data for the diffusion tubes. The previous slide was looking at our real-time analyzers, the fancy bits of kit we have. These are the tubes that we have. Some of them are close by the analyzers, others are other locations. I have to hold my hands up and say that the values that are in the appendix of the report are incorrect. So I've put the correct ones in this slide. I'll update the report accordingly. Sorry about that. I had double checked them, triple checked them, but I hadn't realised that the Excel spreadsheet wasn't calculating what I thought it was. I've highlighted them in red. I hope you can see that. What it's shown is Southampton Road was 41. That's just a little bit south of where the analyzer is, and it always reads a little bit higher. So clearly there the objective of 40 hasn't been met. But Lee Road, Pluto Road, Lee Road Junction 13, Belmont Road, Hadley Gardens. Hadley Gardens is a background. Clearly you can see that they have complied this year. What I've done just at the bottom of that slide is compare the values for this year so far. We've only got 11 months with the values for 2019 for Southampton Road, Lee Road, sorry, bad spelling mistake there, it's Lee Road, Junction 13, Belmont Road and Hadley Gardens. And you can see that for the top four, we've seen a reduction this year between 4 and 12%. Which is more than we would expect to see. I've got some graphs coming next, which I'll make that a little bit clearer. The odd one at the bottom is Hadley Gardens, which is a background. So in other words, it's nowhere near a main road. And that is pretty much unchanged from last year to this year, which I guess people might not expect to be the case, given that we've had the lockdowns and that type of thing. But given it's a background, it may well be then that that's a result of there being people at home more with our domestic central heating on, gas-fired boilers, etc. So that may be a factor in there. 6% makes it seem like an awful lot. It's 1 microgram, which is quite a small amount in terms of the measurement accuracy. But it may be that the background has crept up a little bit from people being at home over this year. It will be interesting to see when we're able to analyse the data in detail when we've got it all verified. But just sort of striking there that if we look at the Southampton Road, Lee Roads and the 2 lead roads, there's definitely been a reduction, which I would suggest is greater than we would have expected to see from the normal reduction that we should be getting from improvements in engine technology. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. I've sort of presented that data in a slightly different way with this graph now. So this is looking at Southampton Road 1, the tube there. The blue thin line is the average over the last 3 years. That's 2017 through 2019. And the blue bars represent the monthly averages measured there this year. Now, we can see that from January, February and March, this year was lower than the average by quite a marked amount. But that, of course, is before the lockdown. And I would attribute that to the relatively mild winter that we had. If we have a mild winter, we have lower levels of air pollution. If we have cold, hard winters, we have much more, we have higher levels. We can see from April that it's dropped actually, and it's similar to March. And the blue line that represents the average is actually increasing up through into the summer months. And yet the values we have for April and June are well below that. Unfortunately, May and July, the tube went AWOL, so I'm not able to report that. August has almost come up to the 3-year average, which is possibly linked to people getting out and doing a bit more, because I think we were kind of seeing relatively low numbers of cases there, and I think people were feeling a lot more confident about things. But then it's continued on like less than the average for the next 3 months. I don't have December's data, unfortunately. It's not back from the lab yet. But I'd expect that, well, whatever it is, this year's average is going to be less. So it's not quite clear perhaps why August jumped up like that. I'm assuming it was maybe people on holiday and maybe feeling off the leash a little bit at that point. But then September, October, November, we can see figures still underneath what we'd expect. I'll just move on to the next graph. Oh, sorry, I keep doing that. Apologies for moving the wrong way. I've done a similar thing for Lee Road, Pluto Road and Lee Road Junction 13, and I think you can see there that it's pretty similar, and it seems that August is the month where we've kind of got back to the preceding 3-year average, but all the other months are under by a greater or lesser extent, on some of them by quite a substantial amount, both within the lockdown and previous to it. So just talking then a little bit about the DEFRA grant projects that we've got. Be aware of the ICNIR low cost sensors. I don't know, I can't remember what Izzy had said at the last meeting, but certainly I know that she's been having trouble with reliability with the sensors. So we're now on Mark 3 of the devices, and they were installed in mid to the end of November, in both in Eastleigh and in Hamble / Bursledon, where the other area we're looking at is. I had a quick look at the data before the meeting, and we've got improved data collection this time. It looks like they've operated successfully throughout the period up until I looked at it yesterday. Partly that might be down to the fact that the new devices allow the ICNIR to access the device online and check that it's working all right and work on it without actually having to visit site and switch it off and on again, which is what we usually do with these things, isn't it? So they're able to work at it remotely. We'd agreed before Izzy left with ICNIR that we'd review the data from these new devices in 3 months, so that's roughly the end of February, and our DEFRA project report is due at the end of March into April, where we'll be commenting on whether we're going to continue into the next phase of the project if we've got the reliability with the devices, and we'll be taking it from there. At this point, though, it's a little early to say because we don't have a review of the data collected, but it's looking more promising as the collections seems better. They did also improve the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi sensors for the traffic count part of those instruments too. Then moving on to the Clean Burn project, burn less, burn cleaner, burn better. The government highlighted in the clean air strategy that particulate matter from burning solid fuels in urban areas was contributing to poor air quality, so when the next DEFRA bid came up, we put an application in to fund a project to spread the good word about how best to reduce emissions. We've done that jointly with New Forest Winchester Southampton, and a company who's appointed to carry out that work for us, which is the Environment Centre in Southampton, who I think they're a charitable organisation working in the environment area, do fuel poverty and things like that as well. People may know them. The main aspects of the project are burning less, so in other words, using your fire only when you must, or as little as possible. Burn cleaner, so using properly conditioned fuel and the correct fuel. People often aren't sure about that, so we'll be signposting to where people can find out information about that and given clearer information about that. And the government is also going to be working with suppliers to ensure that they only provide or sell fuel that's in the correct condition, in other words, properly dried when we're talking about wood. Burn Better is in liaison with the Swimney Cheaps associations, and that's basically ensuring that people properly maintain and operate their devices. Again, I think people quite often aren't sure how often they should be getting the chimney or the flue swept, and then when they should damp it down and open up the air to get the fuel through. So it's giving advice there for people around how to operate the device correctly, which if it's burning efficiently, then it's producing less air pollution. I'm not sure about CO2 though. And Burn Different, that then is encouraging people to look to the alternatives. So whether that would be something like gas-fired central heating, but as we're seeing nowadays, you know, with global warming, we need to push on beyond that now. So we're also signposting to information around, you know, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, where, you know, the emissions can be controlled at source from the power station, if you like, or green source, in which case then hopefully there's a virtual virtual situation where people are able to heat their homes more cheaply and with less emissions. We started the project in November, just before bonfire night. Focus this winter's on the solid fuel side of things, the wood burning, as I've mentioned, and that's been done through letter drop and posters, and there are some posters available, so I'll be happy to take members' thoughts on where would be some good places to locate those around Eastleigh itself, to get the message across on that side, though there are media campaigns going on in association with the council's comms team. And then in spring this year, it's this year now, isn't it? Spring this year, they're going to start looking at domestic bonfires. So through the summer months, it'll be a focus on bonfires, and then come the winter months, focusing back on the solid fuel burning for heat. And then last but no means least, just picking up on some of the action plan actions. The Ricardo source apportionment study, that's obviously something that's been funded by yourselves. That's not happened so far. The dates kept getting pushed back before Christmas, and then the bad weather kicked in, and then they had to send it off and get it analysed, get the equipment calibrated. I've had a brief online conversation with the consultants. They're waiting for it to come back through from Spain, where it was being calibrated, so it's looking like it's going to be a few weeks yet, and then we'll be looking to get that started. I know people are concerned about traffic levels and will it be representative given we're in lockdown. I was reviewing some information recently, there's been quite a bit in the press, where they're suggesting that it's round about 60% of what it was prior to lockdown, prior to COVID. So at 60%, the consultants are reasonably confident that we'll get a representative information back on that. So that's all to come. It's a little bit disappointing that it's taken, hadn't been done before Christmas. They were all set to come, and then I think they had a problem and they couldn't do it. They wanted, to be fair to them, they want to get it done in one hit. They don't want to be doing it in bits and pieces. So that's the argument. Equipment upgrade. We've upgraded the continual analyzers at the Point, Steel Close and Southampton Road. They've all had new analyzers installed. That was the finance that was available. The Point and Steel Close are working well now. We did have a bit of a comms issue with the Point at just before Christmas, so I wasn't able to get down there until just into the new year to fix that, but it seems to be working again now, so hopefully they'll be able to pull out the data for that week and a half, 2 weeks. Southampton Road, as I mentioned, we've had a problem there with the cabinet water leak. I was probably being a little bit conservative to put a new cabinet in, but given the amount of money that had been spent on equipment, we really didn't want to risk it getting wet again, and having a problem with that. So unfortunately, it's taken way longer than we'd hoped for with just with COVID. It's just such a pain trying to get some things organised and access to the lamppost for the power to be cut off and that type of thing. It tends to take way longer than it might seem humanly reasonable to. Promoting electric vehicle charging. Colleagues have advised there's a supplier's been identified and had some contractual issues that led to the initial delay, but they are saying that by February this year there'll be 8 rapid and fast chargers will be installed at Romsey Road Car Park, Shannon Retail Park and Chestnut Avenue Retail Park. and an ultra rapid charger at places for leisure. EBC fleet upgrade. The infrastructure and vans introduced at Eastleigh House, an electric road sweeper and road cleaning vehicle are being trialled with the aim of phasing into the fleet. And over 50 petrol-powered hand tools have been replaced with electric models, saving over 1,600 litres of fuel in 6 months. I think on that one, I kind of thought for a minute 1,600 litres doesn't seem much, but if you think how much you put in your car over the course of the year, those of us who commute to work, it actually comes out at quite a lot of miles in a car. And I think that would end up being quite a lot of emissions saved from that. So that's actually a really good thing, given that it's all done in and around the town. The other one I mentioned there is pedestrianisation of the high street. Obviously, that's something that was backed during the summer and is being carried forward. I know it's not necessarily universally supported by everyone, particularly traders with the difficult times, but I think people see it as being an important step forward for the town centre. The low emission taxi scheme, that one we're trying to get some discussions going with Southampton and Electric Blue around how we can kind of use what the remainder of that scheme up. But again, COVID's had quite a bit of an impact on that, on the taxi sector, so it's made life a little bit difficult. And the final 2 points, the low cost Census project and the clean burn project, I've covered those previously. Thank you. Sorry, I'm really not quite sure how I get out of this now, I'm afraid.
Bear with me a second, Neil, and I'll rescue it. Give me 2 seconds.
Please. Sorry about that.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, that's appreciated.
Okay, so thank you very much for that, Neil. We have a member of the public, Mr. Simon Payne, who has sent in a written statement, which, Guy, I'd be grateful if you could read, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start now. Chair and councillors, I'm extremely concerned when I read this report before you today that the automatic monitoring station in Southampton Road is not working. In fact, it hasn't been working since August 2020. Without this, we're not able to get accurate readings of the air quality in this area. In turn, this leads to it looking like we are meeting objectives, yet we don't actually have the evidence to claim that. My first question is, when will this be working again? If we then look at the annual data, which is being reported to you today in Appendix 2, for Southampton Road, it says that the annual mean is 25 for nitrogen dioxide. What the report fails to mention in the same table is that is only from 60% data capture, and some of the months where restrictions were eased are not included, nor the colder months at the end of the year. This is factually inaccurate, and I would ask that the report and the website are updated accordingly. If we also look at the diffusion tube data as well, currently not available to download on the website, and there is an issue with the link, so I'm using the graphs in Appendix 2. In January, it shows as nearly 50, February around 43, March to May had issues due to COVID data, so is null. June was just below 30, and then August and September just below 40, and October, November just above 40. Yet in the data table, it says the annual mean is 31. If there is no data for a month, it is being recorded as 0, and if so, that is significantly impacting the annual mean. Excuse me. If we take the data for Jan, Feb, and August, November, that shows the mean in these months to be over 40. Due to the lack of the automatic analyzer and the data that has been submitted in this report, it makes it look like we don't have an air quality issue, but we do still. Yes, hopefully less traffic due to COVID restrictions may have reduced the levels, but how can you accurately and factually say that? We need to get the automatic analyzer working again as a matter of urgency. On the action plan, I also think the council should be looking at making the whole of Eastleigh Town Centre a smoke-free zone. The type of fuel that is used on coal fires should be the smokeless type, and on wood burners, again, the wood should be restricted to ensuring it is dry. Bonfires and fireworks are also other factors that should be investigated, especially as, unfortunately, the number of people suffering post-COVID effects are increasing. This council needs to be doing the maximum it can to improve the air quality in this area. Would councillors consider adding this to the action plan to consider if a smoke-free zone can be introduced? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Guy. Neil, would you like to respond to the points that Mr. Payne has made in his statement?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, sorry, so a little bit of a delay. Yes, I think I covered the point about Southampton Road not working. It is regrettable. I mean, I think anyone that knows us will know that we want to collect that data, and it means a lot to us to do so. So we're annoyed about that as well. But given the expense of the equipment, we felt it was appropriate to put the new cabinet in, and unfortunately, as I've said, it's taken a lot longer than we would have wanted it to. However, I'm happy that we still have the tube data that we collect from very close by locations nearby, and I think, as I showed in the presentation, I did acknowledge that was incorrect, that we are still exceeding the 40, and certainly I don't see it from where I am that we would be resting on our laurels and thinking we've cracked it. I think we've been doing this long enough now that we know that the numbers vary from year on year. All we need is a few cold winters and levels might buck the trend again. We'll have to see. I think one thing that I perhaps didn't mention in the presentation that I think has been picked up on is that certainly it appears that with bus usage falling, more people have been buying cars, and if they're older second-hand cars, then there's a danger that may lead to an increase in the short term until things return to normal. Let's hope they do as soon as possible, but it may mean for a little while there's a blip in the opposite direction there, and the monitoring data that we collect will show that. And I think the study that we'll be getting done by Ricardo, the source apportionment study, would pick up on that too. So I'm sorry if there's thought we're trying to mislead there. It's my bad on that, my fault if I've not made that clear in the report. I completely accept that. And that's the point next about the annual average being 25 for Southampton Road. As the questioners correctly said, if you look at different periods, you'll get a different value. I think if we were to go back to the graphs that I showed before, you'd see they're kind of like a U shape. So they're higher in the winter ends of the graph and lower in the summer. And it varies from year to year how pronounced that U is. So if you take the first 6 months of the year, that's roughly an indication of what you'll get for the next 6 months. So I appreciate the average in there isn't a good figure, and I'm not pretending that it's reduced. What I have done though is had a look at the annual average for last year, and that was just at 41. So I would anticipate that this year it would be a little bit less than that. So it may have gone down. It should have gone down because of the reduced traffic. But we won't know until we've had the data validated later in the year and adjusted in line with the corrections that need to be applied. The tube data and the analyzers get checked against the calibrations that we do and the averaging that's carried out usually in the spring. So for the next report I'll be able to come back and comment on that in more detail and clarify any misunderstandings there. In terms of looking at the diffusion tube data, I mean, I think I would go back and say that, I think yes, there's always odd missed months when we do it. Sometimes, people decide to interfere with them and chuck them out. there are methods for us to correct that. I haven't done that this time round because we haven't got the verified data yet. When we've got the verified data, we will do that and we'll be able to calculate an average, but it'll not be a million miles away from the figures that I quoted in the presentation rather than the ones in the report. I do apologise again about that. We do have an air quality issue, and you know, I think the action plan is there for 5 years to work on that. So hopefully we will see improvements over time. And I think the actions I've outlined do speak to the fact that we are taking that seriously. It's an interesting point about the smoke-free zone. In the government's Clean Air Strategy 2019, they highlighted solid fuel burners, coal fires, etc., as having a contribution to local air pollution, particulate matter particularly, and they've signalled that they'll be taking action on that. Unfortunately, that legislation hasn't come to light yet. We imagine, or we understand, it will be similar to the existing smoke control legislation under the old Clean Air Acts, which sadly I'm old enough to remember. However, what that would do then is declare an area, and then you would be able to enforce people who were using the wrong appliances or the wrong fuel or creating too much smoke. But we don't have that mechanism in place at this time. I would say our PM10 measurements in Eastleigh are well under the existing target, but again, the government have suggested they will be bringing that down, in which case it would be much more marginal. And again, there needs to be a focus on particulate matter. So at this point in time, I think the smoke-free zone is something that, you know, I think would be a good thing for us to consider. I just don't think we're quite there yet. I think we need to wait until the legislation comes out, look at how that shapes up, and then take it from there, really, in terms of whether whether annual targets are going to be reduced, as have been suggested, at which point I think it'll be straight on to that. One final point would be to say the Clean Burn project actually is all about those types of appliances and trying to reduce emissions from them.
Okay, thank you very much for that comprehensive response to Mr. Payne's statement. I'm now going to open it up to members for any questions that they might have, either on the quality report or the presentation this evening. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask? Councillor Tyson-Payne, please.
Yes, one very quick question. Source apportionment, if the traffic is at 60%, as suggested, my concern is that 60% is not 60% of the norm. So there's a different makeup of traffic. So I'm assuming that the source apportionment won't give us the full picture using a 60% traffic population. Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and one I've been speaking to the consultants about. They're reasonably satisfied that it'll give us a representative picture. Clearly, it's not going to be the same. I think if I could call it a suspicion, would be that it might over-represent the less clean vehicles. But then I think that's probably not a bad way to oversample. I would rather we were picking up the vehicles that were the most polluting rather than the ones that were least polluting. And I say that for two reasons. One is that HGVs, vans, buses have generally been operating very similar to how they were pre-COVID. Because businesses are still being operated, deliveries have still been going ahead. We've probably seen an uptick in delivery vans. I think the amount that go past my front door every day, it's incredible. So that's something novel, but that may well become new normal into the future. I think that's part of it too. And I think then, like I say, if there's enough traffic, then we've got a good enough picture to ensure that we can adjust any assumptions that are in the model and where we don't have any local information to make them a lot nearer to where we are. The other interesting thing that the work that the consultants are doing is that they actually take a note of the vehicle registration, which allows you to work out what sort of engine it's got, so you know what theoretically it should be producing in terms of pollution, but they also measure the pollution directly from that vehicle, so they can then marry those two things together. So I think that gives us a lot more power than we currently have. And I think unfortunately if we try and wait until things go back to normal, if we have reduced activity after COVID goes, then we still won't be back to where we were before. You know, we might find we are where we were in 2008-9, where we saw a significant reduction in vehicle movements because of the recession then. So it might be like that anyway, and the danger then is we keep putting it off and we never get it done. So I think if it's at 60%, it'll give us a good picture, and it'll be reliable enough for our purposes.
Lovely, thank you very much for that, Neil. We're now going to go to Councillor Bicknell. Your question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Question statement. Let's follow up on what Councillor Tyson Payne was saying, but Neil sort of mentioned or answered most of it with the source apportionment. With reference to the air quality and the source apportionment, Neil, coming back on that. Obviously, yes, you are right in saying that there's more van drivers around, which are predominantly diesel operated, and that because everyone's just been doing everything online and such like. So with reference to the air quality, even at a 60% or whatever, speed of traffic is actually quite a big thing. So with reference to what Councillor Tyson Payne was saying, and the 60%, the traffic's actually going to be moving faster, and it's not going to be queuing. So therefore, will that speed of traffic be taken into account on the modelling? Because otherwise, as Councillor Tyson Payne has said, that it's possible we might not get a true picture. But yes, whether we ever get back to 100% baseline of traffic remains to be seen. Although an observation in the reports, I was actually surprised that the air quality stats hadn't gone down further, considering we had, especially in the first lockdown, when there was a lot less traffic than there is around now, that it just almost, you would have expected Southampton Road sort of to have almost disappeared because there was nothing down there. I'm actually quite surprised at how high it still is in lockdown. And obviously, just a sort of general comment with the whole thing is a disappointment that the Green Revolution did not materialise out of all this. You've only got to look at not just Southampton because it's local, but various places around the country where all the cycle lanes that were put in never then got used and have all been ripped back out again and basically given to cars once more, which is very disappointing. But yeah, so a couple of questions there and some just general comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good point, actually, that one about traffic speed and the fact that the roads are a lot quieter, even with 60%. I mean, I was in Eastleigh town last week, and I was sort of surprised at the amount of traffic moving around. But I totally take your point about people driving a lot faster. I've certainly noticed that as well. I'll raise that with the consultants and see what their thoughts are on that. I think where they carry out their work, though, they tend to do it in more freely moving parts of the road system. I think that obviously works better for them with the instrumentation, but I'd need to double check with them. I think that's actually a very, very good point. I think the other one as well then about surprised that they hadn't dropped further, I think that caught everybody by surprise. But certainly, I know in some of the very, very heavily trafficked streets in London, they did see significant drops. And that's because the air pollution we monitor is a combination of two things. One's the background, and one's the roadside contribution from the vehicles actually passing by the monitoring device. If you cast your mind back to the slide, and I showed that one of the monitoring locations, the background one at Hadley Gardens, had actually increased just a little smidge this year. I mean, it's probably really not changed at all. It's probably the same value it was, but I think that's gone to show that the background hasn't dropped. And for most of the roadside locations in Eastleigh, at least half of what we measure is the background, which raises an interesting question about where we focus our actions. And, you know, not just focusing on the roadside is an important one for us. I think we need to bear in mind that, you know, we're upwind of the motorways in Southampton, so you know, the background contribution is coming from there too. Certainly, people have been at home more, and I know it was a lovely warm summer, but then, you know, people will be, you know, running hot water taps and things like that way more than they would have been anyway, and that just clicks your boiler in and out. So that may well have been part of that. But again, I would go back to saying that of the road contribution to what we measure in Eastleigh, a large fraction of that is the heavy goods vehicles, buses and vans, which I think of certainly they make up more than half of that anyway, and that will have still been there. So we can see that quite a lot of the air pollution was still around. I think certainly at the beginning of lockdown you can see there's quite a dip, but certainly later on when it got back to around 60%, I think it perhaps highlights how difficult it will be to significantly reduce air pollution without fairly major changes in people's patterns of behaviour. And then just on the final point about the green revolution, I completely share that. I live in Salisbury, and Salisbury went for a traffic people-friendly scheme, and that was booted out unceremoniously within about a month or so, before it really even had a chance to kick in. But I think it's often the fear of the impact on business that's affected people, and understandably so. It's going to be tough all around, but certainly, you know, I think the thing is we need to stick at these things for quite a while before we can see whether they work or not. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge.
Okay, thank you for that, Neil. Just one final question from me, which nicely follows on from the last point that you and Councillor Bicknell were making. I just wanted to ask about the Transforming Cities Fund, because I saw from the action plan that we received funding in March 2020, and that for Eastleigh itself we were looking at 2 cycle routes. I think one was going north-south and one's going east-west. And timescale for completion is February 2025. And just bearing in mind, you know, the points that we were making about just how important it is to, you know, trying to get people out of their cars, get them cycling. Obviously, that really supports not only our green agenda, but also our well-being. You know, it's good for our health. I was just wondering, in terms of those 2 Eastleigh cycle routes, when will we start to see sort of changes on the ground, where, you know, bearing in mind the sort of funding came in sort of nearly a year ago, you know, when will we start to get those cycle paths is it being built, is it being connected, is it, you know, connecting existing cycleways? Can you just sort of give us a bit more detail on that, please, if possible?
Thank you. I'm afraid I can't. I'm kind of reliant on colleagues for that. So what I'll do is I'll need to go back to them. What I can say is we now have a new officer on board who's briefed with the climate change agenda. It's Andy Brennan, I think. He's the project manager for much of the climate change agenda. So what I'll do is I'll speak with him, and I'll relay your thoughts and concerns about that, and see if I can get the feedback for you in terms of what the project timescales are, and try to get those done as soon as possible.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much for that. We look forward to receiving that. So can I ask, please, for a proposer for the report?
Yes, Chair, happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. And can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Irish.
Mm.
Is everyone happy that we go straight to the vote on this one, or does anyone particularly feel that they want to debate this? Okay, sorry, can I just check? Councillor Bicknell, do you have another question you want to ask?
It was a very quick question, just as you literally started asking for a proposer and a seconder. It was just basically, it hasn't been picked up by Neil or anyone else at the matter, but did we have any high pressure blocking weather patterns during March, April and May, Neil, that you're aware of?
Short answer, no.
Okay, no, fine, thank you.
Okay, so does anybody wish to debate this? Okay, I can't see anyone does. So because, as I say, we were having technical difficulties with the system, we're not going to use electronic voting. So what I'm just going to ask councillors to do is just to unmute, and I'm just going to ask you to just all indicate that you are in agreement with the report, with noting the recommendations of the report.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreement, yeah.
Agree.
Thank you. And just for fullness, is there anybody who wishes to abstain or disagree? Fantastic. Are you happy with that, Laura?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we're now going to move on to item 9, which is the financial management report. Can I ask Guy to introduce his report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I won't make this long introduction. It's there on the agenda, but just to highlight the recommendations, there are 10 in all for budget allocations in the near future, up to 10,000 for some bank reinforcement works. We're still unsure of the precise amount, so hopefully that is adequate for that project, but more detail to follow. The remainder recommendations 2 to 9 are all about our summer programme of events, and obviously that is with a heavy caveat of in anticipation of being able to hold these events. We may have to revise that in light of COVID guidance. And the last one is, as you mentioned earlier in your report, the 5,000 allocated for the extra leaf clearance. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions for Guy, please? Okay, I can't see anybody indicating they want to ask a question. So can I have a proposer for the report, please?
Yes, Chair, happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne, and a seconder,
I'll
please.
second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Irish. Any debate? Okay, so there appears to be no debate on this one, so I'm going to again ask councillors, can you please unmute and indicate that you are happy to agree with the recommendations of the finance report?
Agree.
Agreed.
Fantastic, that sounded pretty good to me. Just for clarity though, is there anybody who wishes to abstain or disagree? Lovely, then that's clearly passed. So we're now going to go on to item 10, which is fees and charges. And Guy, can I just ask you to briefly introduce this as well, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, again. Yes, a very simple report. It's part of our annual process, and there are 4 appendices to this report which set out our proposed fees and charges to address a 2% yield target, and happy to take questions on any of those.
So do members have any questions they would like to ask on the report? It was fairly straightforward. Okay, so I can't see anybody asking a question, so can I have a proposer, please?
Yes, Chair, happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne, and a seconder.
Yeah, second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Irish. Any debate? Okay, so let's go then to the vote, and again we will follow the same procedure. Can I please ask councillors to unmute and to confirm that they're happy to accept the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Agree.
And thank you. And just again to check, is there anybody who wishes to abstain or who is not in favour of the report? Lovely, that's clearly carried. So moving on to item number 11, this is our community grant. I'm not sure if, yes, indeed, I think Siobhan is going to introduce this. So Siobhan, could I ask you to briefly introduce the report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The Community Grants Panel met just after Christmas to assess this year's community grants. We had 8 in total from local groups with an allocated budget of 13,000. As this year was so badly affected by COVID, you may notice that some of the applications didn't appear to fully meet our usual criteria. However, as a panel, we felt it was really important to support the local groups. So I'd just like to mention that and ask if this can be minuted, please. The grants panel recommendations are contained within the report, but I'd be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Siobhan. So does any member wish to ask a question about the grants, the recommended grants? No, I can't see that anybody is asking any questions. So do I have a proposer for the report, please?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to propose.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bourne. And a seconder, please.
Yeah, second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Irish. Any debate on this? No, that's good then. Let's move.
Sorry, Chair, I did type in.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
That's okay. Just as a member of the panel, it's great to be able to do this for local community. There are some awesome charities and charitable organisations out there doing an awful lot of work for the residents of Eastleigh, and I'd like to thank them all for their efforts and for the submissions that they put in, because it's always good to be able to celebrate local charities and the great work they do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for those positive comments, Councillor Bourne, which I would certainly endorse. I think our only disappointment was that we weren't able on this occasion to give away the full amount, because we were very keen to sort of do so. And just as a general update, I have been speaking to one community about how we might further improve the process so that we can get more money out to more of those wonderful organisations that Councillor Bourne was just telling us about. Anyone else wish to speak on this topic? Okay, I'm now going to go to the vote. So again, can I ask councillors to unmute and to show or indicate that they are in agreement with the recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Great.
Thank you. And just for clarity again, anybody wish to abstain or wishes to vote against? Thank you. So that's clearly carried. So that takes us to the final item on tonight's agenda, which is planning appeals. So I just need to ask members, do you have any objection to noting the appeals?
Nope.
Okay, so thank you, councillors. Those are noted. So councillors, officers and members of the public watching, thank you. This concludes the meeting this evening. I would just like to take the opportunity to thank you for listening and bearing with us through the little technical glitches that we had. The next meeting, as I referred to earlier, will be a special additional meeting on the 10th of February 2021 at 7 p.m. So thank you very much and good night, one and all.
Thank you, Chair. Good night, everybody.